A U.S. congressman has ignited global controversy by accusing South Africa of siding with communists and terrorists while pushing a sanctions bill that could reshape diplomatic relations. The move targets South Africa's foreign alliances and has sparked fierce backlash in Pretoria, raising tensions between Washington and a nation long seen as a symbol of democratic transition. In an explosive statement that has sent political shockwaves through both Washington and Pretoria, a U.S. congressman behind a newly introduced sanctions bill has accused South Africa of siding with communists and terrorists. This scathing declaration has ignited a firestorm of controversy, reigniting Cold War-era rhetoric and adding fuel to an already intensifying diplomatic confrontation between the United States and South Africa. At the center of the storm is the South African government's increasingly assertive foreign policy, which critics in Washington argue has drifted dangerously away from the West and closer to authoritarian regimes and radical movements. Before we get deep into this unfolding international showdown, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. If you're passionate about international politics, South Africa's global positioning, or how U.S. foreign policy affects the world order, this is the place for you. We're here to keep you fully informed and miles ahead of the headlines. The lawmaker leading this aggressive legislative push is Republican Representative John James from Michigan, a vocal critic of what he calls South Africa's deliberate tilt towards anti-Western regimes. His bill, currently under review by the House Foreign Affairs Committee, demands a full investigation into South Africa's military, economic, and political ties with countries deemed adversarial to the U.S., specifically Russia, China, Iran, and others. Speaking to U.S. media outlets, James stated, "It is clear that South Africa has abandoned its role as a democratic partner and instead chosen to stand with communists and terrorists. The American people have the right to know whether their tax dollars are indirectly supporting regimes that threaten global stability." Such rhetoric would normally be dismissed as political theater, but this time, the U.S. Congress appears united in concern, even if not unanimous in approach. Democrats have expressed cautious support for an investigation but stopped short of endorsing sanctions at this stage. However, with bipartisan pressure building and national security concerns front and center in an election year, the proposal has gained considerable momentum. And in a Congress sharply divided on nearly every issue, the fact that South Africa has emerged as a flashpoint speaks volumes about the current state of U.S.-Africa relations. What seems to have triggered this diplomatic fireball is a pattern of recent behavior by the South African government. Joint naval drills with Russia and China off the coast of Durban in early 2023 raised eyebrows and blood pressure in Washington. Pretoria's refusal to denounce Russia's invasion of Ukraine and its abstention from multiple UN votes condemning the aggression only deepened suspicions. South Africa's increasingly vocal support for Palestine, Venezuela, and Cuba, and its criticism of NATO and Western interventionism, have further exacerbated tensions. Then came the BRICS expansion, welcoming countries like Iran and Egypt into what was already seen as a growing counterweight to Western power. To many in the global south, BRICS is a hopeful platform for a multipolar world. To lawmakers like John James, however, it's a red flag signaling the strategic alignment with regimes that undermine democracy, human rights, and the rules-based international order. South Africa's leaders have responded with visible frustration. Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Naledi Pandor, denounced the congressman's comments as insulting, false, and colonial in tone, reaffirming that South Africa remains non-aligned and independent in its foreign policy. President Cyril Ramaphosa has taken a more measured tone, stating in public forums that South Africa will not be bullied into abandoning its values or historical alliances. Speaking at the recent G20 finance ministers meeting hosted in Cape Town, Ramaphosa said, "South Africa is a sovereign nation. We will pursue peace, justice, and economic partnerships that benefit our people, not serve foreign interests." Ramaphosa's message resonated with leaders across Africa and the global south, many of whom see this latest American bill as yet another example of the West trying to dictate terms of engagement to independent states. Yet the practical stakes of this diplomatic standoff are very real. If passed and implemented, the US sanctions could target key sectors of South Africa's economy, including arms manufacturing, mining, energy, and even financial services. Worse still, the US could pressure allies in Europe and Asia to follow suit, potentially triggering a cascading effect of isolation. The American business community is also paying attention. The US remains one of South Africa's top trading partners, and any disruption to trade flows could have devastating consequences for South African exports like citrus, vehicles, wine, and platinum. Already, investor confidence has begun to dip, with analysts citing geopolitical headwinds as a major concern for portfolio risk in Southern Africa. Inside South Africa, the rhetoric from Washington has polarized political discourse. Opposition parties like the Democratic Alliance, DA, and Inkatha Freedom Party, IFP, have called on Ramaphosa to repair relations with the US, warning that alienating the world's largest economy is not in South Africa's interest. The Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, on the other hand, have praised the government for standing firm, accusing the US of acting like an imperial power threatened by the rise of African autonomy. For average South Africans, however, the concerns are less ideological and more practical. With unemployment still sky high, the rand under pressure, and rolling blackouts continuing to affect businesses and homes, many fear that sanctions would only worsen an already difficult economic situation. For a country trying to bounce back from years of stagnation and corruption scandals, new international restrictions could be a devastating blow. The irony is that South Africa has long been celebrated by the US as a symbol of democratic transition, reconciliation, and constitutionalism. During the Mandela era, relations were strong and full of hope. But as global power shifts and alliances realign, that symbolic relationship appears increasingly strained. What happens next could set a precedent. If Washington succeeds in pushing through punitive measures against South Africa, it may embolden similar actions against other middle powers that choose to chart independent foreign policies. Alternatively, a backlash against American overreach could solidify support for BRICS and deepen the divide between the West and the Global South. For now, the world waits. Diplomats on both sides are working behind the scenes to de-escalate the situation, but with strong personalities and political stakes involved, there is no guarantee of resolution. What is clear is that the era of passive alliances is over. South Africa, like many nations in the 21st century, is being forced to answer a difficult question: is it possible to remain neutral in a world increasingly defined by binary choices?